Hey listeners, this is Peter and welcome back to the History Shorts. Today's episode is brought to you by the Podcast Republic, your ultimate listening app. Discover and subscribe to thousands of podcasts from around the world. Download Podcast Republic today, available on Google Play and the Apple App Store. Today on History Shorts, it's one of the great what-ifs in American history. What if a founding father, Thomas Jefferson, had followed through on the dying wishes of his closest friend in the revolutionary generation, Tadeusz Kościuszko? If he had, thousands of enslaved people might have been freed, Jefferson's own slaves among them. Instead, Kosciuszko's extraordinary act of moral vision, a will that could have changed the story of American slavery, was lost to bureaucracy, politics, and neglect. This is the story of the promise that Jefferson broke, Kosciuszko's last will. Today's History Brief returns to the daily rituals of historical figures, and specifically that of Nikola Tesla. A quick word from our sponsors. This day in history. On January 17, 1773, British explorer James Cook crossed the Antarctic Circle for the first time, pushing human exploration into the planet's most extreme environment. On January 17, 1961, President Dwight D. Eisenhower delivered his farewell address, warning Americans about the growing influence of what he called the military-industrial complex. Story of the day. Tadeusz Kościuszko was born in 1746 in the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, a man of enlightenment, education, and fierce beliefs on equality. Trained in military engineering in France, he crossed the Atlantic in 1776, drawn by the American fight for liberty. He arrived in Philadelphia with little money and very broken English, but a letter of introduction that would change his life. It was addressed to none other than Thomas Jefferson. Kosciuszko soon made his mark on the revolution. As chief engineer of the Continental Army, he fortified West Point, designed the defenses at Saratoga, and helped deliver some of Washington's most decisive victories. Washington called him, and I quote, "a man of science and merit." Jefferson called him as pure a son of liberty as I have ever known, end quote. Their friendship grew out of shared ideals: equality, freedom, and Republican virtue, though they would live to embody these principles in very different ways. After the war, Kosciuszko returned to Poland, where he became the leader of an uprising against foreign domination and societal inequality. When that revolution failed, he was imprisoned by Russia, hailed as a hero across Europe, and eventually returned to the United States in 1797, wounded, older, but still passionately devoted to human freedom. By then, Jefferson was vice president under John Adams, a man of letters and contradictions. He spoke eloquently of liberty, yet remained a slaveholder, unable or unwilling to resolve his moral dilemma. Kosciuszko, appalled by what he saw in Virginia, confronted the hypocrisy head-on. According to witnesses, he asked Jefferson why the champion of liberty could own other human beings. Jefferson, ever cautious, deflected. But Kosciuszko did something remarkable. He turned his outrage into action. On May 5, 1798, while living in Philadelphia, Kosciuszko drafted a new will. It was short, direct, and revolutionary in its moral clarity. He left his entire American estate, including back pay from the Continental Army, investments, and land, to Thomas Jefferson, to be used for the education and emancipation of enslaved people. The document read, in part, "I hereby authorize my friend Thomas Jefferson to employ the whole thereof in purchasing Negroes from among his own or any others, and giving them liberty in my name." End quote. The language was unmistakable. Jefferson was to be both the executor and agent, the man entrusted to free slaves and fund their education. Kosciuszko's intent was clear: to create a ripple of freedom through the very heart of Virginia slavery, beginning with Jefferson's own plantation at Monticello. At the time, Kosciuszko's fortune in the United States amounted to roughly $18,000, an enormous sum equivalent to more than $500,000 today. It could have freed dozens of people and given them land, training, and education. Jefferson accepted the appointment without hesitation. He wrote to Kosciuszko that he would faithfully execute your will, end quote, and expressed admiration for his friend's benevolent purposes. At least on paper, the stage was set for a profound act of emancipation. But history, as is often the case, turned not on ideals, but on procrastination. Kosciuszko left the United States shortly thereafter, returning to Europe to advocate for Polish independence once again. Jefferson went on to become president in his own right in 1801, author of the Louisiana Purchase and the University of Virginia, but not the executor of Kosciuszko's will. The years passed. Kosciuszko continued to correspond with Jefferson, though their letters became more formal and much less frequent. The general never returned to America. In 1817, at the age of 71, Kosciuszko died in Switzerland, still a citizen of two revolutions, but a man who never saw either liberty or equality fully realized. Upon his death, his will was sent to the United States, and suddenly, the executor, Thomas Jefferson, retired and in his 70s by now, was confronted with his old friend's promise. By this point, Jefferson's relationship to slavery had grown even more complicated. His debts were mounting. The plantation in Monticello was struggling. He had written passionately about emancipation in his youth, but had freed only a handful of enslaved people in practice. Now, with Kosciuszko's will before him, Jefferson faced a moral and legal dilemma. To carry out the will would mean not only freeing enslaved people, but publicly aligning his name and his dwindling finances with a direct challenge to Virginia's slaveholding order. Jefferson obviously hesitated. For years, he said nothing. Finally, in 1819, he wrote a carefully worded letter to Kosciuszko's American representative, expressing regret that he was, and I quote, too old to undertake such a laborious a trust, end quote. He declined to be the will's executioner. In doing so, Jefferson effectively ensured that Kosciuszko's vision would never be realized. What followed was decades of legal confusion worthy of a Dickens novel. Kosciuszko's American estate became entangled in competing claims, contested wills, and procedural delays. Executors assigned after Jefferson stepped away were appointed and then replaced. Lawyers argued over jurisdiction between the United States and European courts. The money, the same funds meant to buy freedom, sat untouched in a bank account, accumulating interest but achieving nothing. For nearly half a century, the estate remained unresolved. In 1852, the Supreme Court of the United States finally ruled that the will could be executed, as the designated executor had declined and Kosciuszko had died in a foreign land without clear heirs. By then, Jefferson had been dead for more than 20 years himself. The Civil War was less than a decade away. The funds that could have freed men and women in Jefferson's lifetime were instead absorbed by legal fees and the slow machinery of bureaucracy. The story of Kosciuszko's will is also the story of a friendship, though, and how ideals can fracture against reality. In his letters, Jefferson had once described Kosciuszko as the purest son of liberty I've ever known. And Kosciuszko, for his part, adored Jefferson, calling him my great friend and a man of virtue and knowledge. Yet in the end, Jefferson could not bring himself to live by the ideals that his friend embodied. Kosciuszko had fought against slavery in Poland, serfdom in Russia, and monarchy in Europe. He had put his life on the line for freedom in two hemispheres. Jefferson, the philosopher of liberty, failed the test of action. The History Brief. The following comes from Mason Curry's Daily Rituals, published in 2019. Nikola Tesla. As a young apprentice in Thomas Edison's New York office, Tesla regularly worked from 10:30 in the morning until 5 a.m. the following morning. I've had many hardworking assistants, but you take the cake, Edison told him once. Later, after he had started his own company, Tesla arrived at the office at noon. Immediately, his secretary would draw the blinds. Tesla worked best in the dark and would raise the blinds again only in the event of a lightning storm, which he liked to watch flashing above the cityscape from his black sofa. He typically worked at the office until midnight, with a break at 8 for dinner in the Palm Room of the Waldorf Astoria Hotel. These dinners were carefully scripted affairs. Tesla ate alone and phoned in his instructions for the meal in advance. Upon arriving, he was shown to his regular table, where 18 clean linen napkins would be stacked at his place. As he waited for his meal, he would polish the already gleaming silver and crystal with these squares of linen, gradually amassing a heap of discarded napkins on the table. And when his dishes arrived, served to him not by the waiter but Major D of the hotel himself, Tesla would mentally calculate their cubic contents before eating, a strange compulsion that he had developed in his childhood and without which he could never enjoy his food. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today and helping me make this little show a mighty success. As I've been mentioning this week, if you are enjoying the show and would like to help me out with its production, you can always donate a few dollars to buy me a coffee or become a Patreon member to enjoy these episodes ad-free. Both of those links can be found on my website at www.historyshortspodcast.com. Thank you again for your patronage and support. History Shorts Podcast is a one-man show, from research to script to production and editing. So if you are buying me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com, you really are buying me a coffee. Have a great rest of the day, and I will talk to you all again tomorrow.